I am William Mould, a simple man, a farmer by trade, from the humble soil of County Cork. My hands have always known the feel of earth, my back the weight of labour. But these last years, the land has not been kind to us. The potato blight, that cruel and unseen disease, has taken more than crops from me. It's taken hope, pride, and for many, life itself. My wife, Jane, strong as she is gentle, has stood beside me through these hard years. We buried more than half of last season's harvest, the once green fields turned to rot. It was more than a man could bear, watching his labor spoil and his children grow thinner each day. But worse still was the empty look in Jane's eyes as she watched our little ones go hungry. I remember the day we spoke of leaving, clear as yesterday. The fire in our hearth was barely a flicker, the warmth we once took for granted slipping away. Jane had just finished stitching patches onto our eldest's trousers, so thin the fabric felt like air. The room was quiet, except for the crackling of the weak fire. That's when I finally said it. "Jane," I began, my voice heavy with the weight of it, "we can't keep living like this." She didn't answer right away, but I could see she knew what was coming. We had heard whispers in the village, stories of ships sailing south, to the Cape of Good Hope, they said. A place far from famine, where the soil was rich and life could start anew. It seemed a world away, a dream too distant for the likes of us. But when a man's back is against the wall, dreams become all he has left. "William," Jane finally said, looking up from her stitching, "I've been thinking the same. But how can we leave everything behind?" She spoke the truth. Our lives were here. The patch of land my father had worked before me, the small stone cottage that had sheltered us, the graves of those we had lost, all tied us to this place. But those ties had grown bitter. The famine had stolen the future from Ireland, and there was little left here but suffering. I reached across the table and took her hand, rough from work but still soft to me. "What future do we have if we stay?" I asked. "Our boys are growing weaker by the day, and we can't feed them. The Cape, it might be the only chance we've got." She looked at me, her blue eyes brimming with tears she was too proud to let fall. "And the girls," she whispered. "They are so young. How could they survive such a journey?" It was a question that haunted me. The voyage to the Cape would be long and hard, I knew that much. But staying would mean watching our children fade away. We could not bear that, not anymore. We'd find a way, I told her, though the doubt weighed heavy on my heart. We'd take what little we have, board the ship, and we'd build a new life there. Together. For a long time, Jane was silent. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes, as if the very land was telling us to go. Then she nodded, slowly at first, but with growing certainty. "If we stay, we'll lose them," she said. "If we go, at least they'll have a chance." That night, we made the decision that would change our lives forever. We would leave. The thought of leaving Ireland, the land of our birth, cut deep. But we had little choice. Over the next weeks, we sold what we could, mostly livestock, what little we had left. The house, the land, we left to fate, unsure if we'd ever see them again. We packed only the essentials, a few clothes, some tools, and what little food we could muster for the journey. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the neighbors, the few who had weathered the storm alongside us. We embraced, exchanged promises to write, though we all knew letters would be few and far between. The morning we left for the port, the sky was grey, low clouds hanging like a veil over the hills. The children, too young to understand the weight of our decision, clung to Jane as we walked the dirt road. I glanced back only once, at the cottage that had been our home, then turned my face toward the horizon. There was nothing left for us in County Cork. The ship was a crowded thing, full of others like us, families fleeing the famine, men and women with hollow eyes and hands calloused by toil. We found a corner in the hold where we could huddle together, Jane and I with the children between us. The smell of the sea, mixed with the sour stench of so many people packed into the ship's belly, was enough to turn the strongest stomach. As we sailed south, the days blended into one another, endless waves, the creaking of the ship's timbers, and the occasional squall that would send us all clutching to the rails. Jane and I took turns keeping the children fed with what little we had, though rations were thin, and sickness lurked among the passengers. But the further we sailed, the more I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something waiting for us at the Cape. Weeks passed before we saw land again, the jagged outline of Table Mountain rising from the sea. The sight of it filled me with both dread and hope. We had reached the Cape of Good Hope, a name that sounded like a promise. But the real work was just beginning. We would need to find a plot of land, build a home, and start again. As we disembarked, Jane stood beside me, her hand gripping mine. The children, wide-eyed and weary, clung to her skirts. I glanced at her, and she gave me a small, brave smile. Despite all we had been through, we were together. That was enough. Looking out over this new land, the wind carrying the unfamiliar scents of Africa, I made a silent promise to my family. We would survive. We would build a life here, far from the famine and the sorrow we had left behind. This was a new beginning for the Moulds. The Cape might have been a world away from County Cork, but it was where our future lay.